Welcome to Operation TS as we're starting to wrap up our final days. The Indo-Pacific Conference in Sydney finished yesterday and the team have had a great time demoing Operation TS live at the event. Today we're looking at the 9th of November here, UTC, and there are fewer tankers in the area reporting on AIS than we saw on the 6th of November UTC. As we're starting to wrap up the operation today, we won't go into exploring and looking for new vessels of interest, but instead we'll spend a bit more time looking in depth at some of the vessels and what we've learned from the last few days. If you did want to have a look a bit more into how we had been filtering the area to look for vessels of interest, you might want to check out part 1 of the 6th of November update, which is available in our YouTube playlist for Operation TS. And in that video, we mentioned how Charlie Brown tweeted on X about 6 ship-to-ship transfers occurring in the area. And we're going to take a bit of time exploring those in more detail in this video. Part of what we're going to look at today is combining the use of optical and SAR imagery. There are pros and cons to both, and we've been fortunate enough that on the 6th of November UTC, we have optical imagery from Sentinel-2, and here we've got some SAR imagery from Sentinel-1 over our area of concern. One of the known constraints for optical is that it can be obscured by cloud cover when looking for vessels, but we've been fortunate enough that there's plenty of cloud-free areas in this Sentinel-2 image. My colleague Andrew Middleditch, a remote sensing scientist at Starboard, has marked up the 6 points that Charlie Brown identified in his post on Twitter, and I'm just going to use the URL he's shared with me to bring those up on screen now. I'm going to zoom into this area here where we've got 4 of those ship-to-ship transfers. And you can see quite clearly here the 2 vessels. And again over here, if we head a bit further, you can see the 2 vessels here and here. You can also see other vessels where we have been able to match the optical image to an AIS location, for example the Ivy here. And you can see here there's no AIS detections for these vessels that are on screen at the moment. If I zoom back out again, closer to this ship-to-ship transfer up here, you can also see that there's a few vessels in the area that are also not reporting on AIS. This one appears to be steaming further north, and this vessel over here, but they're obviously alone and there's no ship-to-ship transfers occurring. So now I'm just going to jump forward in time to our synthetic aperture radar image. So this SAR image looks pretty different, and I'm not going to go into detail on how SAR works, but I will add a link to a useful document that Andrew has written on remote sensing in the comments of the YouTube video. So when I click through here, it's pretty obvious that there is a vessel here, and SAR is excellent at detecting these large tankers. It is, however, a bit less obvious that there are 2 vessels here. You can kind of see that the reflection is perhaps a bit wider than you might see if there was a single vessel, but you can't say for sure that there's definitely 2 vessels in this image. You also can't really use this information to identify which vessels these are. If I just go back to the optical image, for example, you could do things like use the measurement tools to approximate how long this vessel might be, potentially up to around over 300 meters. But if I go forward with the SAR imagery, you can see it's a lot more ambiguous about the size of this vessel. And that's really because the size of the bright spot on the SAR image is more related to the radar reflectors, and it's not always necessarily tied to the vessel size. SAR imagery is great, however, for having large footprints and covering a broader area with those footprints. So if I go back to see here, along with the size of the vessel, you might be able to use other identifying features to help ID who these vessels are. And although I'm making that sound like it's really simple, it's definitely not. And the team at Tanker Trackers have been providing us fantastic insight on who these vessels might be during these ship-to-ship transfers. And that's really based on a lot of additional intelligence that they bring, as well as a really good knowledge of who these vessels are and there is identifying features on them. I'm just going to overlay a Planet high resolution optical image here, and you can see how those distinguishing features really do become even more obvious in these high resolution images. The other good thing about the high resolution images is the opportunity to identify much smaller vessels that might not be available in lower res imagery like Sentinel-2. And with commercial providers like Planet, and also those offering SAR imagery commercially, there is a possibility to also task these images for specific locations at fairly short notice. So they're much more suitable than Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 for areas further from the coast. Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2's primary application is land coverage. I'm just going to quickly zoom in on this point that Andrew's marked up for us as well. So in here, this was the location for a ship-to-ship transfer that was identified in the optical imagery. And we can see when we move forward in time, those vessels have moved on from that location in the SAR imagery. And what we know from tankertrackers.com is that this was the RANI that was engaged here in a ship-to-ship transfer. So I'm just going to bring that vessel up on screen. And what's interesting here is the RANI is quite far away from where it has been identified. But we can see that at this point in time, and I'm just going to turn the vessel tracks on. So during the ship-to-ship transfer, the RANI was reporting on AIS in this location. And once that was nearly complete, as it moved on, it has reported, I'm just going to turn on the AIS points here, it has reported one point near to where the ship-to-ship transfer occurred, and then has since moved on. So it looks as though the positions here, and also likely the positions reported potentially in port, may not be accurate. So we've got one final video to come for this week of Operation TS, and in the video we'll explore the Angel a bit more that we mentioned yesterday. I just wanted to say thanks again to all the support that we've had from Starboard Maritime, S&P Global Market Intelligence, Planet, Rae Baker, tankertrackers.com, and Charlie Brown to pull all this information together. It's been incredibly helpful, and we've had a huge amount of learning going on behind the scenes. Potentially in the coming weeks, we may set up a follow-up demonstration or session with some of the team to discuss some of the more detailed points that we've been discovering as we've been going. But do keep an eye out for that and the next video coming up.